Hey everybody! In today's video, I am going to make sort of a keepsake shadow box inspired by The Secret Garden. Now, whenever you're doing an interactive three-dimensional project, my tip is always prep all the pieces first. So when you're done, you can just put the box together and have this beautiful little shadow box. So I'm prepping the pieces by ink blending Limelight ink all over the front and the back of the main pieces of the box, which I will go over in detail. And then I took the larger panel and I am taping off the edges after just barely ink blending a little bit of Limelight around the edges. And in the smaller panel, I cut a little arch that I want some night sky to show through. So I'm actually going to create this with two different colors. I'm using Lazy Day, and this is a little bit of a cooler blue than Boysenberry, which is the purple ink I'll be putting on top of it. This just gives sort of a richer color blend than using a single color, and it's just a little trick I like to do with ink. So I'm just checking to make sure that the arch that I cut will show the ink blended part with no white space in the middle. And I'm going to add the Boysenberry. And look at that, how that warm color goes on top of the cool color, and it just makes it pop. I think this is such a pretty combination. So I'll put my little arch down. This die, this smaller panel die, is also included in the set of dies, and then the arch dies are separate. So now my little portable spray booth, which is grid paper, is ready for me to do a little bit of splattering with some white paint. For stars, I've just added a little bit of water, but make sure it's really mixed up well. I didn't have it mixed that well the first time. So now that I mix it a little bit more, I can splatter some stars on there and work on my little fairy. She's so cute. So she's very easy to color. I'm going to color her with a combination of Copic markers and graphite markers. The graphite markers have a super fine point on one end, which is great for small images like this. I'm not doing any kind of fancy coloring here. You really don't need to. That's one of the reasons that I just love smaller images like this. Is I don't have to spend a ton of time coloring them. Coloring isn't really with markers my forte anyway, so this makes it easy and makes me look more skilled than I am. So now I'll color her dress, and this entire shadow box is about complementary colors. So since the majority of the box is going to be green, I needed a complementary to that. I've actually used two. I used purple for the sky, and I'm using orange, both of which can be complementary to green. So it's all about that back and forth of color. Now I'm adding some pink accents to her little dress. Pink and orange is one of my favorite combos. And I will make her hair green because she's a fairy. So her hair can be any color she wants it to be. And I love this little green. And that will help her be very harmonious with her green surroundings. She is a little secret garden fairy, and so green is a color that seems natural for her. Now, no fairy is complete without a little bit of sparkle, so I've added some glue to her wings, and I'm adding this beautiful iridescent glitter, and it made a little heart on my grid pad. Now here the glue is still wet, so her wings look sort of dimensional, but that's going to completely flatten out, and I'll show you that flat version, but I wanted to show you how sparkly and beautiful she is. Next, here are all the ink blended pieces, and I want to add some pizzazz to the leaves. So I'm adding Caribbean Sea, which is a cool color, and Jalapeno Popper, which is a warm color, and I'm going to be using both of those. Again, it's about contrast between cool and warm colors. That always makes everything more interesting, and there are lots of cool and warm colors in nature, so I'm going to put them into my garden. So first I will show you the little rails that come with this die set. These two little skinny rails are the ones that I'm going to be using. They don't show behind the frame of the shadow box. These thicker rails can be used to add grass or hills or all kinds of things. They stick up a little bit farther in the shadow box. Whenever I'm getting ready to make one of these, I usually cut all the pieces multiple times just so that I have everything I need, depending on what I decide to design with. But here I'll be using a top rail and a bottom rail to showcase these beautiful leaves. Now you can see that the wings have flattened down on my little fairy. That glue settled down and she's just as cute as she can be. I've glued the two panels together for the sky, and then there is the little arch panel that I cut. Now I have a very fun trick for you for folding scored lines that are very thin little sections of your cardstock. So this little flap that you're going to put glue on, those can be tricky to fold. So you can just stick them into your MISTI ruler into the channel and just use that 90-degree angle on this nice thick ruler to bend that score line initially. It's perfect for this. I use it for this all the time. I actually use this more than I use it as a ruler because it is so handy for little gluing flaps like these. So I will show you that a couple more times because it's just so very useful. Now you will have cut two of those same panels that I just showed you. And in the second panel that you cut, you'll want to cut the opening for the shadow box. And that's what this solid die is for. You can also use the other die if you like, but I like using the solid die for the opening. And you just want to center it on the larger portion of this die cut to create your window. Now here, because the score line is right next to the window, that makes it even a little bit kind of a softer fold. And so this ruler trick really helps there since it's just such a skinny little piece of paper. You can get it started with the ruler, and then it's so easy to crease with your bone folder. So same thing, I will put the little glue flap. I just can't do these with my hands as effectively as I can when I line them up on this thing. So if you're not into measuring, but you are into folding and scoring, highly recommend doing it with this ruler. These are incredibly easy to put together because all you do is put glue on those two flaps and put your box together. Easy peasy. There is nothing complicated about this little shadow box. Then I will take my prepared panel with the two layers and put that on the inside. That kind of covers up the little glue flap on the right where you've put the box together. And then I'll take the smaller panel that comes in the die set that I cut with the arch die, and I will glue that down over my little sky. So this is like a little window into a night sky for my little fairy who's getting up to whatever fairies get up to at night doing their little magic. And I will go about working on the leaves. Now I just want the sort of dotty pattern that sprayed ink will add to cardstock. I love this. And I'm alternating cool and warm colors again because that's more natural. It gives a lot of interest to these little leaves and makes them so much fun to look at through the little shadow box format. You'll see in the close-up how pretty the two colors are together. Even though they're sort of similar, you'll notice how different they are on these little leaves. And it just makes them more interesting. These leaves have some embossed detail on them too, which is phenomenal. And you can use just a tiny bit of ink on your craft mat and you will get all these leaves done. It's super easy. You'll also get inky fingers, which is really the sign of a day well spent, in my opinion. So that is a bonus. So once these are all done, and I'm not adding a ton of water to this ink, FYI, this is just regular cardstock, not watercolor paper, so you don't need a ton of water to activate this ink and get it to transfer onto your leaves. But look how cute those are with all those little spots. It looks so interesting. So now I'm going to take some gold ink and put that on my craft mat. My plan is to paint the outside of the shadow box gold. And so I want some elements on the inside of the shadow box to have gold on them as well to tie that together. And I thought that it would be fun to splatter the leaves with gold ink. that will also mimic the splatter that I did on the sky. So it's all going to be sort of coordinated and harmonious. So again, I bring out my little splatter booth, which is my grid paper with one of the pieces popped up. And I watered down the ink just a little bit before splattering it on the leaves. And you'll see in the close-up how cool this looks with the gold outside of the box. But you'll want lots and lots of gold. You can't have too much shimmer. I've got my glitter on the fairy wings, and now I have my gold on the leaves. It's going to be very sparkly and pretty. So that is all splattered. Now, if you're an impatient person like me, when you are done splattering, there is a very simple little trick that you can do. I'm spraying my paintbrush to sort of half clean it off. And I'm just going to rub the extra ink on here, not because this is what I'm going to do in the end, but just to show you how the outside of the box contrasting with the cool green on the inside of the box is going to end up looking. And because I have extra ink on my mat, I can show you that, but see what a contrast that is between those warm and cool colors. But there's my little quick method of drying. Close that top sheet, just sort of absorb some of that gold ink, and that is a quick way to dry your leaves. So now, as I said, I'm going to put a bottom rail and a top rail to have some leaves protruding into this scene from the inside. So I'm just adjusting this rail at the bottom. The only thing you need to worry about is it all one even height? You can just pop that in from the bottom, put glue on either side, and you can begin to glue the leaves onto these little rails. The glue gives you a lot of wiggle room. I really do recommend using liquid glue for this. Also, since this is a fold flat card, the whole shadow box will fold flat and fit into an envelope. It's going to be opened and closed, and so the adhesive needs to be a strong adhesive for that to go through the mail and then be opened and played with by the recipient. But see the gold splatter on the leaves? Doesn't that look great? And then when I get the real gold paint on the outside, you're going to see how pretty this is. So there it is with all the leaves. Oh my gosh, she is really in a secret garden. It's so much fun. I love it so much. You could also add to this with one of the lights that MFT sells. So you could have a light up shadow box, which would be very fun, especially for this secret garden. But I just decided to do a night scene here. So now I am using some fluid acrylics to paint the outside gold. So you got a preview with the leftover ink that I had on my mat, but now you can see how pretty that's going to be with a metallic exterior. I chose a smaller paintbrush that is about the size of these side rails. The other thing that this gold paint will do is make the shadow box into a keepsake. It's going to be very sturdy with that layer of acrylic paint on it. And so if the recipient of your card wants to set this beautiful little scene on their desk, it will be a nice little accent for someone's desktop. And there you can see the gold and how that coordinates with the outside. Just beautiful. So I am going to paint the rest. I'm going to use a larger paintbrush so that it goes a little bit faster on the sides. And you'll want a pretty thin layer of paint. You don't want really goopy paint because that can warp your cardstock. Just a thin little layer of paint will cover this beautifully and make it shimmery. It's very easy to cover this all in one fell swoop. The reason that I ink blended the inside is so that no matter where you look, I ink blended the front and the back of all the pieces of paper. No matter where you look, you see this beautiful serene green from the inside. So you can see there a little peek of the back of the rail that's holding the leaves. So even if you're looking at the back of the shadow box, everything is all one color and it's really harmonious across the entire design. You could also get this look with cardstock, but when you use cardstock, you'll just want to coordinate your ink colors with the cardstock. For me, it was easier just to use one ink pad, and then that way I knew everything was going to be the same color. You can also control the intensity of the color when you're ink blending. So here I have a very, very pale version of Limelight, and I could have a more intense version by putting down more ink. So you have a lot of options when it comes to even just a single ink pad. You don't have to have a lot of inks to make this really, really interesting. So here I'm painting the last side of this little box. I just love the way this looks, and I had my finger there, so I kind of stretched out that bottom rail, but I will poke that back and it'll be just fine. So now I'll clean up a little bit so I don't mess up that back side with the paint. And I wanted to show you, this is the main portion of the box. You'll cut 2 of those. Then the 2 different sizes of rails are attached at the bottom. You can see I used the skinny rail, top and bottom. I cut multiples of those. The thicker rail you can use to hold up, like I said, grass, trees, hills, etc. This is the panel die that I cut the opening of the shadow box out with. It comes all attached like that, so you'll want to cut that apart for sure. And then just cut out your little side pieces. But then there's also this larger panel, and that's the one I used for the backmost piece that sort of covers up that little glue tab that's on the right-hand side. And then I put the smaller die on top of that I cut with this adorable little stitched arch die. I love these dies. And then these are the botanicals. I left them all tabbed together and I ran them through all at once to get all my leaves. And here you can see this beautiful little secret garden with the gold frame. It almost looks like a picture frame. It's so beautiful. So much fun, sweet little fairy. So here's the close-up of this project. I really hope you give this a try. This is one of the easiest 3D dies I've ever used. Thanks so much for watching.